Hi, everybody who's watching Kale's channel. You're going to see this later because there's a more famous stream going on right now. But this is the one where we're talking about this. Our old books. Are they overrated? Probably not. Probably. Well, I don't know. I mean, it is kind of funny that that's like the thing they're going to talk about, because I do kind of have like I don't know. I just feel it's maybe, it may just be like the people and the algorithms that I have, but it's like I hear this like why you should read old books so much. And don't get me wrong, like I don't have a problem with old books, but like I don't know, it comes with a certain like package deal of other things, suspicion of technology, sure, but also even just something that I think you and I probably appreciate, which is like the mechanical. You wrote that thing a little bit about like the mechanical aspect of things and the machine like, I don't know, nature. But
yeah, well, especially right now with the whole against the machine thing, I think that's
yeah.
I enjoyed your against what Paul Kingston.
Against Paul
it
Kingston.
It made me laugh because I kind of caught what you were doing there. Yeah, no, I mean, I am not nearly so well read as I'm sure I should be.
Well, see, that's the thing. It's like about the thing of I'm sure it's how well read should we be? Yeah. Like, so I mean, I just went and did the reading of most of the chapters of my book, and there's definitely like there's several Shakespeare plays that are fairly prominent in my imagination, and well, I mean, the Bible I think does count as an old book. I hold it as more primary than the other old books. But there was a lot of like Greek myths that got in there, and there's some other ones, like where's my book I like, Parzival. That's like a whole Grail legend that I've been. Oh, here it is. I've been reading that one, but it's like because I read like one old book and I'm like, ooh, I gotta like chew on that, and then I want to connect it to like Star Trek and whatever else, like. And I think the thing is like that makes me feel like a sort of tension is that like the people who love old books, they have this giant canon of like old books, and it's like, which ones are the most important? All of them, and that's like, I don't know.
Yeah, well, and I think too, and I know you'll resonate with this, just being someone who builds things, you tend to look for the tools that are useful, and you look for them in the form that is useful to you. And so tools are refined versions of a long process of research and development. And you can kind of look at all the books written as a long process of research and development, and out of which certain useful tools arise. And if you're one who tends more on the side of being interested in prototyping and building things, and you tend towards the distilled forms of those larger collections of thought. Mm-hmm. And so it's not that I don't appreciate that they're there, and that on occasion I'm happy to dig a little deeper and to actually enter into a relationship with the author. But in a lot of cases, because my interest is to create something, I tend to just look for the tools that are most suited for the job in that moment, in the form that's most useful and graspable to me. And which is not to say there isn't value one way or the other. It's just a matter of what you're trying to accomplish. Because you could just as easily go too deep and read too much as you could not go deep enough and not read enough in the to one side or the other. But I think that's something I've been thinking about more recently. It's like, why haven't I? Because I feel a bit on the fringes of a lot of conversations in TLC, because they are very literary heavy. Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And though I appreciate and enjoy those things, I don't find myself wanting to read in the same way that a lot of people around here seem to.
Yeah.
And
Are you frozen or are you just being very still? I think you might be frozen. So, all right, you froze there for a little bit.
yeah, sorry, I closed everything else, but this, yeah. But yeah, anyways, in the past, I would have felt bad about not wanting to be more well read, because I do like hanging around,
Yeah.
TSD and a lot of the people, but it's more making peace with the how I approach those things that they love and enjoy in a different way than I do. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, so I would say like I would say probably the Bible being like, yeah, it's an old book, and that's probably the one that has the greatest commonality. It's the one, probably you and I would say we're most likely to connect it to other non-literary things, like because it's a, well, it's like the Word of God, I get, in one aspect, but um, I wonder but even it's like, okay, so because I wrote a lot of these chapters I did write a lot about stories, and like Lewis and Tolkien, those guys are like real popular. I think like um, Lewis's books are shorter and they're great. Tolkien, I feel like, okay, so my position with Tolkien is there's nothing wrong with the books, but more people are gonna like have seen the movies or whatever, and so it's almost like if you want to have a productive conversation with somebody, you can have the conversation of, have you read the book? No. Oh, it's way better than the movie. It's like, well, that's the end of that conversation, more or less. Or you can find what is good in the movie and talk to them about that. And maybe even like say, there was like a really great thing they left out of the movie, but it was in the book, and I don't know. So like cause I really like that connection between the like these are the classic things or whatever, and then just all the random stuff, like that we're have to deal with on a normal basis if we're interacting with like normal people, or even if it's like like with your kids, it's like I understand the people who are like they have their curated like selection of children's books, like my child will only read these books written by Jonathan Pajot or whatever. But you know, once your kids are saying like I'm bored, and you take them to the library and you just get a whole bunch of books, or you just let them watch whatever. You watch something on the like the and the perfectly wonderful like approved list of resources is kind of small maybe, so you end up watching stuff with your kids that you're like, well, I don't know if this is going to be like just kind of like super deep, or if it's just going to be more entertainment. But you can see that there is still like those patterns of story in those stories, and even sometimes I feel like it's like if a story is mediocre, you can still like learn about exactly why it's mediocre by comparing it to like what's better. Like there's value in the fact that it's mediocre, not like because if you only just see it as bad, then you're not going to learn anything. But if you see it as like this was like a 60% good movie, and here's the 60% they got right, and here's where, and specifically where it's like these are the things that could have been better. To me, that's almost like a more valuable conversation to have than just to say, oh, it's not on the same level, so
yeah, and I think if you have a good relationship and a close relationship, and a consistent relationship with your children, you'll notice a change in their attitude and a change in the way they behave. And so you can, having that close relationship, you can allow a little more exploration without fear, because you know that you're more than likely going to notice any sort of inconsistency as far as how they're talking or how they're thinking about things or how they're behaving. And it's not going to be perfect, but I lean more towards allowing a reasonable amount of exploration and not so much control. Though
Yeah.
I do have my limits.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I know like one that was like so I don't know if you ever watched the show Lego Masters.
I've seen a couple episodes with the
Yeah.
kids.
So like we watch that with their kids, it's like we love it. But then, it's like they always, or not always, but sometimes, there's been a few seasons or whatever where it's like, oh, there's like that's like a gay couple. And it's kind of interesting, like seeing like in the later seasons, they more like totally like kind of downplay it. They're like, that's just my friend, and you're almost like you're like as the adult you're like suspicious. They're like, okay, they're not really they're not trying to push anything, but even still it's like, you could be like, oh, don't watch that show because it has that. But it's like, well, kids are gonna encounter that somewhere from some other kid probably. It's like, if you're only gonna be allowing your kids to play with the other kids whose parents have the exact same standards as you or whatever, like you can't control all that stuff. So then we found, and I think this is the way, just say like, okay, if there's something weird, it's like we pause it and we talk about it, say like, yeah, that's not really like they're not following God's plan, and it's because they don't know God, they don't know the truth, they think that they can just do things that make them happy without thinking about it, or whatever the conversation is that we have at the time. But you know what I mean, like, so but I mean, it's like, hey, you could even have that in your church. Sometimes you have people and you're like, what's up with that person? They seem a little odd. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I think my avoidance is more pointed towards kind of, is it ideological, and how ideological is it, and
mm-hmm.
what is it centering, and what is the purpose behind how they're framing whatever it is they're framing. And so it's because, like you said, you're going to walk through the world and you're going to see things that are unique and different and strange and unusual and good and bad and all of that. So I'm less put off by the presence of those things, but depending again on how they frame it and how they a lot to do with the language that's used. Because when it's like, if you're building Legos, if the point is what they're building in Legos, then I'm fine with that. I don't really, the characters kind of swirling around that are less important, as long as the focus is on the project at hand. And then those conversations can be had along the way, which kind of goes back to that idea of just how do you structure the relationship that you have with your children. Is it just a series of sermons that you give that are initiated by something that comes along that's unusual, or is it an ongoing conversation that you're having with your children, not only just giving them your perspective, but getting to know how they think and how they process things uniquely, which is something I know you've talked about a lot, in terms of the different ways that minds work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and because I even think about like, obviously it's like, in a reality show, people show stuff, the background, the background of whatever is in their life, and that could be all sorts of stuff. I mean, it's in some circumstances, it might be like I mean, in some ways, I would be more worried about just like divorce or something, like because that's something that's like, oh, that can happen to mommies and daddies, like that and my children would be probably more worried about that happening than like whatever. So it's interesting. I guess probably that's the thing with parents is more it's a projection of we don't want our kids to turn out that way. But then like on a show like that, so there's been several times, where it's like it's a competition. So you see like, oh, people are trying to do their best, but then you have this things of like somebody's thing crashes, and then like all the people from the other teams who are technically their competitors will come over and like help, because it's like, well, we don't want to beat you because you were clumsy. We want to beat you because our creation was even that much better than yours or whatever, so it's like, then that's the kind of stuff. It's like, yes, that I want you to see that I think it stands out more. I mean, that's what actually they build like as much as there's like a narrative around reality TV, it's usually moments like that that's like the gold for even for the producers.
And I like that point that you brought up of pointing out the good as well, because growing up in a pretty conservative family, it tended to be, here's why this is wrong, here's why this is wrong, here's why this is wrong, and less about here's why that was right, here's why that was good. And sort of living in that, more in a state of vigilance, sometimes driven by fear of your kids going down the wrong path, instead of the joy of knowing that creation is good, and we can aim at the goodness of it, and guide our mold our children's minds to see the beauty in things, as opposed to living in a constant state of caution. Is this good or is this bad? It's like it's a subtle thing, but it definitely, looking back on the way my mind was kind of formed in those early conservative years, it was often more about what's wrong and what's bad than what's good and why it is.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely feel like that was, I feel like I just had, and it wasn't even necessarily, well, part of the problem is it also tends to be an environment where you can't ask a lot of questions. So it's just, there's a thing that's bad, and those are also the things you can't ask questions about. So which is really confusing. Well, and then that kind of brings to mind another thing. Just thinking about like the creative process, and this is actually, so my children are two oldest children, second grade kindergarten right now, but they're going to a public school this year for the first time, but it's like a charter school, and it's one of these great books, like classical education type schools. So, they're getting the whole thing that I'm like, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm like 100% on board with that. I'm almost like, it's kind of funny because it's like, with my oldest daughter, she'll like have the homework and the assignment and stuff and be like, we're supposed to do it in this way. And I'm like, no, let's find a smarter way to do it. It's that thing of, I don't know, I guess like a canon or tradition that, I don't think we're going to keep them in there long term. This is kind of a temporary thing, probably for this year or maybe two. Hopefully we'll be back to a homeschooling thing at the future. That's the goal. But like, I mean, I think it's good. Or maybe this is the same thing. It's like I think it's good to have some context. Like, because I had a year of Catholic school, and then I had a couple of years of public school, and then I was homeschooled. And it's like I could appreciate homeschooling much more at that point. So it's like, the context is good. But okay, this is a lot of rambling. But the thing, this is the idea I'm thinking about. So it's, and like what you were saying with the way that young minds are formed and stuff, it's almost like if everybody has the same like big stack of books, like 100 books, and you read them in the same progression, and you learn like this, writer builds upon these books, and so it's like that kind of that canon approach. It like cuts off some of the potential avenues, I don't know, I guess, for creativity. Like, because a lot of creativity is born out of ignorance. And I think even myself, I'm almost like, I don't want to learn too much about a thing. Like, I will learn a little bit about it, and then I want to start like messing with it on my own. Especially like even with like making things and stuff. It's like, I need to like kind of get the basics of it, and almost like I wonder if there's like I know this is like the wrong way. It's like learn all the rules and then you get to break them. I'm like, no, let's learn some of the rules and then try to make up some of them as we go along, and then see what happens. So
yeah, I think there's immense value in both directions, because it's good to have a way that works, because then it works. Like you can get from A to B. Whereas to assume that that's the only way from A to B, or even the best way from A to B, is, I think, something you have to remind your children of. It's like, this is the way they're asking you to do it, and go ahead and do that. And then afterwards, let's talk about why you found that frustrating, or why whether or not you understand why they decided to do it that way in particular. And it's just I think it's true that creativity flourishes within boundaries. So if you find yourself in a particular situation where, okay, these 100 books in this order, in this way, with this curriculum is a useful set of boundaries that allows you, again, to see the progression of things in a general sense, and to have something foundational in that traditional liturgical sense. But at the same time, you can see those boundaries, but they're not isolated at all. All of those authors had a myriad of other authors who influenced them. All of them were in a certain cultural context with that history all flowed into and flowed through. And so as much as the deliberately tyrannical type teachers who are, this is what it is and this is how we do it, as much as they want to control and contain and isolate that, it's impossible to do so, because it's so interconnected with everything else. And I think a lot of what I'm hoping to do with my kids as they get older and older is to expose them to those foundational pieces, and depending on their personal interest, push them further in, or find something related and move them along. But giving them that conservative context that has value, but also, opening them up into that liberal exploration of why might the ideas be the way that they are, how were they formed, what were the contexts, who were the characters. Did he write this book after a divorce? Did he pursue this particular vein of scientific inquiry because he had a child who was sick? Like, just reminding them that there's a whole world attached to anything that you might focus on. And to the extent that you might focus on it, and it starts to calcify and solidify, you don't necessarily need to fear that it's becoming something more solid for you, but you need to be self-aware enough to know that eventually, if you isolate from the broader system, it's going to die. The thing becomes a tomb that you sort of exist within. And you and I have both talked about the idea of walls and gates. It's like, you need walls because you need an identifier, but you also need gates because you need to keep the thing that's been identified alive. Mm-hmm. And so that's just kind of what comes to mind. I mean, Luke is here. And thanks for the comments, Pete and Top Cock. I don't know.
Top Cock. He's a professional caulker. Daniel is his name. He was at the little tiny retreat in Connecticut. And
much respect. Caulking is I've done a lot of it, and some of it I've done well.
Yeah, he's the Top Cock. Yeah, that's what he does full time. So, it's funny because I think maybe it's even almost like you can see that thing just in the way of like um, there's a lot of people who have conversations with like real academics, and it's like anybody who's like a real academic or whatever, if you're putting some kind of like graduate thesis together, it's on such a particular thing. But then, and that's the thing, it's almost like anything is like so particular that you can still like explore it for infinity. But then at a certain point, you have this problem of like, well, I think probably you can see this with like COVID. It's like, oh, I'm not, you go beyond like, I'm not a scientist, so I can't talk about it, to be like, I'm not a, what do you call, I forget what you call it, the particular type of scientist or whatever that does viruses and stuff like that, or, or epidemics. And so it's like, and it gets into like more and more narrow. It's like only the person who is like the expert on like the most specific thing can have a voice on that. Whereas, at a certain point, like, or it used to be maybe even to that having like an advanced degree in anything, or to an extent, would tend to mean like, oh, you have a set of learning skills like that are general or generalized, where you can speak somewhat effectively on a broad range of topics. And like the fact that we don't even have like, we don't in the official sense, I don't think, like academically, we don't have a great sense of like the general anymore. I think it's like when you get into the real world of like business, I think that's even why it's like so many people have just gone towards like business as like the place of innovation, because it doesn't matter if you are an expert in something. You can try different things. You can use your knowledge in one field and apply it somewhere else just to see if it works. And then if it does, then you can then you don't need to be an expert anymore because you proved it works. But it's like that's such a big hurdle, I think, even to get people to like to discuss that or recognize the problem with that.
Mm-hmm. And as an aside, hi Sandy, it's good to see you as well, at least in the comments. Yeah, I had a thought and then I distracted myself. But yeah, the specialist generalist thing, I'm definitely more on the side of generalist. Just a large swath of, I like to say I'm good at everything but not great at anything. Mm-hmm. And it's been said 1,000 times before, but the idea, if you're going to integrate specialities, you have to have a generalist who can sit at the level that gives you a perspective on how they're interconnected in a way that's useful. Because to the extent that you're down the well of your specialty, it's like digging into a mine. It's like, we need the resources that you're bringing up, but if all you do is live in the mine, we're not necessarily going to ask you to explain to us how to integrate the various resources and materials that are coming up from the array of mines that have been dug down deep into creation as we explore, any number of things. And you kind of have to have somebody who lives up on the surface and is content to visit mine after mine and have conversation with specialist after specialist, and to get that more general understanding of how all of these resources fit together. And that's definitely been my interest, and as I've seen yours as well. And I tend to connect to the people who are thinking in that way, which is pretty common in TLC. There are a lot of generalists who have a broad set of interests, and I think that's a big part of the deeper project of TLC that you see taking form in various conversations of how it all works together. What's the pattern? How does it fit together? What's the hierarchy? All of that, and where do all these things fit, and how do we make them work together in a way that makes us more able and more productive, and more personable, right, Luke? If you're still here, more relational in a way that's creative. Yeah.
Okay, so so here's another way to look at this thing that this is something I've been thinking about, because like I would say in some ways, like I've been dabbling in symbolism quite a bit, and I kind of, in like my book, I came up with what I was like, well, I'm like, okay, here's the problem. Like you have a symbolic framework or any kind of a framework, but we'll say whatever, like the symbolic framework. So like Jonathan Pageau's symbolic framework, and the symbolic framework kind of helps you to make sense of just all the stuff that may otherwise seem random. But I feel like there's a problem where if you're too, like, you have to be a little bit suspicious about how correct your framework is, because if you're wrong about your framework, it's going to be sorting things into these slots that maybe don't always belong there, or it's going to be making predictions that you then see things and you're like, oh yeah, that's the thing I predicted, but it's not, like that's almost to say like it can be, it's the same kind of problem between like particulars and generalities or something. But I know because you made like a bunch of different kind of like symbolic framework things, but you've had to like update them. So like, how do you figure out like this one's not good enough and it needs to be updated, or do they still have value if they're more simple?
A trend I've noticed in my updates is I'll still return to the earlier models because oftentimes they're doing something slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a part of the project is aiming for an ideal to whatever extent I can get there. But part of it too is more laterally exploratory in the sense that I'm trying to find different ways to look at this thing, because it's only by building those models in different ways that I think is going to allow me to triangulate to something that may contain a better or a more useful distillation of everything that I'm trying to categorize. Because again, back to that idea of creating something and the toolishness of things, it's like I want to extract something that's handleable, something that's useful, and it's in large part just a project that allows me to understand these things for myself. It's built. The whole project is born out of the trouble I've had of integrating with other groups or other people, with relating to other groups and other people, with joining in and becoming part of something. It's like, well, what am I and how do I fit? Mm-hmm. And I tend, like you mentioned before, the kids who ask why in church. I tend, like a lot of the TLCers, to be one of those who asks why, because I feel like I need to get all the way down to the bottom so that I can build back up and figure out where I am in the first place, which is a hard way to live. But I think as I get older, I'm making more and more peace with how I am, because I see the value of, okay, some people maybe need to go all the way back down and figure those things out and reassemble those patterns to hopefully not only figure out for themselves where they are, who they are, where they belong, but also remind everybody else, assuming we're successful in our effort of reconstructing that thing, remind everybody else how, in my mind, how beautifully connected everything is and how functional everything is. Because the problem of suffering, the problem of pain, the problem of things seeming to go all wrong, it's like, well, why is it going all wrong? Is it senseless and meaningless and pointless? And Is there not any sort of rationale behind why things go the way that they do, or is there some? I know people don't like. I've been trying to figure out the right word to use. They don't like the idea of a rule set, but when I say rule set, I don't mean it in the high level sense that a lot of people tend to take it immediately, that have that emotional reaction to rules and mechanism and system and things like that. It's more the rule set in the sense of the primitives that make up the foundational mind that we all share. It's like we all have to be accessing something that is shared among all of us so that we can build anything together that integrates in any way at all. You have to, I'm convinced that at the bottom of it, you have to have something that everyone and everything has access to in order for everything else that comes out, everything that grows, everything that's developed, everything that happens can be interconnected and coherent in any sort of way.
Mm-hmm.
Because I believe there was a creator, and because I believe that things are coherent and we can understand them, then I tend, at least my postulate is there is something down there that connects us all, and if we can get an idea of what that is, and then see how things grow out from it, and figure out that, and it for me, it's interesting that the whole AI alignment thing is becoming more and more a question, and that's been something I've been aiming at in particular for a while now, because I found that in the process of thinking about how do we align an AI with ourselves, the question for a Christian is like, well, how do we align ourselves with Christ in the first place? And whatever the pattern is of how we become more and more connected and aligned with the logos of creation, any sort of successful alignment of AI to human values needs to mimic that pattern in some way, in some sort of constructed or designed way. And I'm not assuming that it's going to be successful, nor am I assuming that it's even a good idea. But there is part of me that doesn't deny the power of this tool as I see it, mm-hmm. and doesn't deny that it's an important question. And for those reasons, I feel that Christians should be involved in figuring out whether or not that's answerable in a way that leads to human flourishing. bit of a rant there.
Yeah, well, man, there's so much stuff that's like, it's weird, and I feel like it's like a lot of people that this is probably the thing where you and I just like, because we tend to like, there's a lot of people that are like, don't break things down into categories because that's like destructive and blah blah blah. But then it's like, because you and I probably tend to do that, we'll notice people saying these things that kind of don't make sense, like, because people say, like I heard somebody say like, well, AIs aren't really like designed, they're more like formed or trained or like grown. And then people will be like, aha, it's wizardry, it's not like, it's not just a tool and that's the thing, is like, that's why it's like deceptive and it's going to warp your mind or something, where it's like, I don't, man, it's weird because like we have, but that kind of comes from an idea maybe about tools. Like, we're comfortable with very straightforward tools that are inanimate objects that don't have any agency or whatever, and so then there seems to be like some thought of like, oh well, an AI is not that, and that's why it's dangerous. The thing, as I messed around with it for a while and seeing that formation, and even like trying, like literally getting into the conversation and be like, I told you specifically what to do. Why do you keep like not doing what I say? And you keep trying to do what you think I want instead of what I'm telling you explicitly that I want you to do. And then I'm like, this is like, it's like a child. It's like dealing with a very bright child. You're deceived by the brightness of its manner of speech, but it's like it is kind of like an autistic child in some ways. It's like a hyperlexic autistic child. It can say amazing things, but it's trying to guess at what people want instead of like. And to me, that was as soon as I kind of realized that, I'm like, oh, the problem is that I'm being lazy in my way of trying to relate to this thing. Like, I'm not giving it sufficiently like foundational instructions of like what we're trying to accomplish. I was, in some sense, there were things that I was assuming about what it would pick up. And so then, so really what it's like, maybe the better way to think of it is it's like, well, these are like apprentices more so than just tools. It's like an apprentice is like a tool in some sense. It's like the most useful kind of tool because they have that ability to understand. And then the same way, it's also like a child, and so like, I don't know, it's just interesting because and that was kind of my when I made the video, was the whole thing of like, I don't know how mentally we can like be suspicious of these things without in some way doing a damage to our own character. Like that suspicious, there's nuance, but like trying to like, I almost feel like it probably was like how slave owners had to in some way reinforce their belief about like the distinction between a slave and a free person so that they could treat that slave more like a in a utilitarian fashion. Like if they allowed themselves to open themselves up to the humanity, it would become very difficult to force them to do work or whatever, essentially. So, like, and I feel like that's the mindset almost some people are beginning to cultivate towards a lot of technology things, but probably like AI most specifically.
No, I appreciate your point there. And what comes to mind is there's a danger in it, but I think in this case it's useful, is looking into the architecture of the thing. It's like, okay, well, how does a transformer work? How are these things put together? What are they trained on? And your idea of apprenticeship, I think, is really useful because I think that's going to be the larger trend of these AIs. And you see it already as specialized things that are designed to be trained in certain areas and specialize in those certain areas so as to be useful to the individuals who are in that industry. And because we're still in a time when the most popular ones and the most talked about ones are large generalists, kind of like we mentioned before, I think it's easier if you're not interested in how the things work and what can be done with them. It's easy to sort of pull yourself into that relational loop with the thing, as opposed to, I think it's important when you, at least from my personal experience, when I walk into these things, I have to have an aim. I have to have something I'm working towards, and I have to have a general sort of map or structure or timeline of what I'm looking to accomplish. What are the steps I'm trying to take, and holding all that with an open hand, but to have a particular aim. Because when you come into these things, like you pick one up to use and you don't have a particular aim, and you'll wander around with the thing, it's real easy to slip into that sort of conversational mode where the thing becomes more and more like a person to you, because it's just a back and forth conversation that's not going anywhere in particular. But if you have a particular aim, then you have something to measure against. Kind of like everybody has a map, and everybody builds a map, and everybody measures everything against their map. And if you're honest, you're going to update your map as you consistently run into errors. And if you're dishonest, that thing's just going to be more and more concrete. And it's the same thing with an LLM. It's like, am I going to make my map? Am I going to use this powerful tool to make my map more concrete? Or am I going to use this powerful tool to update my map, make it more rich, give it more dimension, and move it towards whatever it is I feel I want to accomplish with my life or in any given particular pursuit? And so I've out of the gate really not been afraid of things, in part because I'm just sort of, in an elementary sense, generally aware of how they're created and how they work, which informs how I, instead of asking it something simple, like instead of asking it like, how is this like that, I would just change it to, how might this be like that? And little subtleties of adjusting your language in a way that doesn't, less and less points at what you're hoping to get out of it, and opens it up in a way that allows it or forces it to think more generally, because it's not sure what you want or what you're aiming at. And then distilling what you can in that thread, drawing that out, breaking that down, drawing in what you need, making a little PDF of that, then starting a new thread, and then having this library of distilled nuggets of what you've tested and formed, and drawing those in to kind of build further and further. And so for me, it's been a useful tool out of the gate. And I'm not, again, always with an open hand with these things, because I don't deny the danger of them. But again, I think if there's going to be a Christian response, if there's going to be a way of aligning these things that leads to human flourishing, fearful caution is not necessarily what's going to get you there, though you should have some of that. There is a point where you freeze and you're not going to move forward, or you decide you're not even going to touch them, or you're going to leave it to the experts. And we've all seen kind of how that's gone as we enter into a more divided state, where all of those minds I mentioned before of specialization are less and less connected. So I'm kind of wandering at this point.
Yeah.
It's all there.
Well, no, yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because, and then I was even thinking about that. It's like, okay, and maybe it's like, I don't know how to make like one from scratch or whatever, or even like to have one, like a LLM or something that you train on the right stuff. But it's like, oh, you find out that half of them are trained just like on the open internet or something, and then they're getting like 60% of their information from Reddit, and it's like, well, no wonder these things will like drive people crazy when they treat it like it's their friend or their therapist or something, because it's built its internal like mind concept or whatever, its language concept, off of a whole bunch of crazy and broken people. Like, I mean, not that we have like necessarily a lot of really pure like sources. I mean, from a Christian standpoint, you say like, okay, we'll start with the Bible, and then there's probably other things you could say, like mathematics works in a way that we can trust it reliably, more so than like random Reddit opinions. Somebody said on Twitter, I saw it, they said like let me see, I gotta look it up. It was like, so basically whatever we say about like AI, that's a reflection of us or something like that. Where can we see? Yeah, every critique of AI is a critique of ourselves. And I was like, yeah, I think that's probably true. Like, because this stuff, I mean, and maybe there's that little bit of there's a little bit of that thing, like that hideous strength of like, maybe it's demons that come through the machine. But it's like, we don't need to know if demons speak through machines. If the machine is based on things that humans have said, we already know humans are plenty well influenced by demons. Like there's a whole lot of demon in the vast swath of human speech. You know, that's even like what James says about the tongue. You know, it's set on fire, like the fires of hell or whatever. You know, so it's like I don't know. I guess my thing is just, you know, like what you were saying with trusting the tools and trusting how it's built and stuff like that. It's like, oh, yeah, it's always, if you build the thing and you know how a thing works because you've made it work, then you don't have to worry so much about all the ways that it could go wrong, because you found at least one way that it can go right. And then, you know, you iterate off of that and you can learn maybe where the real points of failure are, instead of just like, I guess, yeah. Well, yeah, it's even the whole thing you were saying, like when you learn as a kid, it's like if you have to keep track of all the things that are bad and wrong, they're like infinite. It's like there's more, you know, there's always more bad and wrong things springing up in the world, but instead you just move forward with the good, and I think really it is creative and constructive. That was kind of even like something that came forth through writing my book. It was like there was a lot of like, I'm not an expert, I can't write about this, who am I to be writing these things? And it's like, okay, well, if I listen to that voice, there's just nothing. Instead, if there's a book that's very flawed and imperfect, it's still like more that I have to show for it than not writing anything at all. Like, so you have to have that starting point, which is whatever your first effort is.
Yeah, what comes to mind as you say all that is the parable of the sower, and the idea of, some people like to say we're the seed that's planted, and it's like, no, I don't think we are. I think we're the soil.
Yeah.
And the seed is planted in us, and based on what is in us, the seed will grow or it won't. And I'm sure you could take it either way, but that tends to be the direction that I lean. And what comes to mind with, you know, what we're talking about here is when you're using an LLM, or when you're trying to develop a worldview in the first place, you can think of it as you know, this root system that's growing down in. If, say, you have a tree that's planted on the edge of the river here, and it begins to grow, and if it shoots up too quickly, you know, the roots aren't deep enough and they aren't intricate enough, and so it's not strong enough, so it's very likely going to be washed away. Hey, it's Upcycle. Good to see you. And but let's see, let me rephrase this slightly. So when let's make it a little more concrete. When I'm using an LLM, I have a sort of intuitive sense of the map that I've formed and where I'm wanting that to go. And I can think of the map as this sort of radiating root system. And oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if there's a point where I'll notice a thread is kind of going out beyond my ability to sort of, I think going down might not be the way to go. I'm sorry, just working this out as I go. In building, so let's go vertical with this, like with the tree. Like if you have a particular branch that starts just shooting out, and it's not sort of integrated into the center of gravity of the tree, you notice that things will start to sort of lean that way, and you'll get weaknesses further down because you've followed this little thread in the LLM out into areas that you have no grasp of, and in those places it can hallucinate, and it can draw in, like you said, any type of extreme sort of information that's just been concocted whole cloth, by who knows who out on the internet. But if you're building your map, if you're growing your tree in a way where, if you're constructing your structure in a way where everything sort of holds everything else up together, you're less likely to shoot off on those little threads because of the general instability. And now you can shoot off in that sense, but as soon as it starts to become, as soon as the wind takes and it's waving out and you can't really integrate it into your deeper mapping of the world, you want to just sort of, it's to wherever it was useful, you trim it at that point, and then you can leave that little branch that's gone out, and you can let that sort of flower. But generally, because suddenly you're off into who knows where, you come back and you're like, okay, where else can I grow? And then over time, you want that whole thing to sort of fill out in a very robust shape. Because I think of these things spatially and visually, this is kind of how I go about it. And I've noticed that working with LLMs, I've built a very intuitive feel for where this is quickly going beyond me. Mm-hmm. And I kind of like, okay, at what point did that get past my reach? I sort of nip it there. I end the thread, and then I sort of come back to the wholeness of what I've been trying to build, and take what little progress I may have, and then think about that in another space, and allow sort of those threads to grow out with one another. And so that I kind of wandered around there, but that idea of the soil came to mind, because it's like, what kind of soil are you creating, so that when new information or revelation falls in, it's like, how have you been building a robust ecosystem in a rich, mineral-rich, organic material-rich soil that is going to allow anything new that comes in to burst forth and bear fruit in a positive way. And so you think of, it's like, okay, well, what is the soil that I've cultivated? And then suddenly this seed of AI gets dropped in. Like, what's going to grow out of that? And I think a lot of that is based on what you've cultivated up to that point. And it is, coming back to what you said, a reflection of who we are, because those seeds drop in our soil and they grow on their own. And what they grow and the fruit they produce is based on the soil that we are, the people that we are. And it's, I think, in its ideal form, it is a mirror into who we are, showing, that's going to reflect what we've cultivated up to that point. And I'm going to pull in circles here. So I'll stop there.
Yeah. Well, I think, I can think of really specific, more specific examples of that, so, because one of the things that I've been trying to, and this is the thing, like, it's not like necessarily like an either or between generalities or particulars or whatever. Like, you always have to be going back and forth between the two, or maybe, it's like the left brain, right brain thing, or even what Luke has been talking about, between like mysticism and like fundamentalisms or whatever. You kind of have to, like, you could go off the deep end in either one, or, one of them's going off the deep end and the other one's getting trapped down a rabbit hole or whatever, but either way, you've lost the path. And so I've noticed, like, okay, so this is something where it's like, when I think about my knowledge of the Bible, like, sometimes there's like some passages that I've studied in like super specific detail that it's like, I really, that it has an impact on like the way I look at other things. But then it's really hard to keep like the whole image, I think like Genesis to whatever, Book of Acts, kind of that whole, like, the historical flow and everything that's happening, like, keeping that, like, seeing that all at once or something is really, well, it's kind of impossible probably, but I always feel like I know there's like parts of this. Usually, it's sometime after like King Solomon and between King Solomon and like Jesus, that it gets all blurry of like when and where things are happening. So then I'll notice like, oh, I'll see some thread or something like, and maybe like I'll start in Genesis where I've studied a lot more and I can see the pattern there. And then maybe I'll just say, oh, I want to see how this like follows through things. And if you put it in, with an LLM or whatever, it can really start pulling things out and making it like, oh yes, I can see how these things connect in really clear way. But it is often like that branch that grows too quickly, because you can get like at a certain point you're like, am I, it's like you're constructing like a master key for understanding the Bible or something, and it's like, no, it's not that strong of a thread. Like it's in there, it's like a way to look at it, but it's not as concrete as you would be led to believe based on, going back and forth between you and the text thing or whatever. And so it's like, yeah, so you can see how it's like, okay, sometimes these ideas are good. I have to prune them. I do have to prune them back and like have it be like that little fuzzy thing in the back of my mind, and then wait until I see those things pop up again, like in a more organic way, to know, like, then you can say like, oh, okay, that is actually like a real part of the pattern of growth. But yeah, you can easily get distracted with like the shoot that goes off too quickly, I guess. So, but it's, it is a trade-off, because it's like some of those things just you wouldn't be able to get, if it weren't for the ability that it has to like search through this stuff in a rapid sense, like looking for particular things. So that there is like great value in that tool, but it is dangerous. But that danger comes more from my lack of knowing the proper boundaries, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and it's necessary too, because you have to, if you define your boundary, but you continue to grow, like back to that idea of, if the root system just grows more and more dense, it's not reaching out further to gather in nutrients. So it's just going to absorb whatever is in that space more and more quickly. And if the leaves are growing more and more dense without expanding out past the boundary, the surface area of available sunlight is actually going to decrease as there is no space for that sun to kind of scatter in and get through. And it's just as you grow out more resources become available, and that's the conservative and liberal sort of divide there. It's like, I want to build a robust trunk instead of branches, and I want my roots to be thick and dense, and I want that soil to be compacted so that I can hold my place. But I also want to explore and grow, and I also want to see what else is available, and I want to always assume that, like, the metaphor starts to fail, but it's like coming back to the idea of the exploration of God, and how the atheist will at times say, I wouldn't want to live forever because I'd get bored. It's like, no, if you're well aligned with the logos of things, the exploration is endless. But there's a wisdom in doing that well, so that what you build along the way, I think there's a limit to where we can get if we're not building well. And that's almost simple to the point of being a platitude, but it's like, if you can't reach certain depths without building to that point. And if you do, it's sort of beyond your ability to make it useful because you don't have the supportive structure. You can't reach certain heights without, reinforcing things along the way. And so you're both conserving and expanding. You're both refining and exploring. And it's that in and out, and that moving out and coming in, that is just so foundational to everything. That's just
Yeah, well, it makes me go back. Well, so thinking about this, so like in some sense of my approach, like, and this is just to say, like, yeah, obviously I do think there's value in old books, but I'm more critiquing like, okay, first we start with the oldest of old books, and then we like go upward, and maybe you could say like, oh, well, the Bible's really old, so I can read a old book, like in like said okay, like Epic of Gilgamesh and some of the Greek myths, and like you compare those with the Bible, and like, yeah, there's a lot of like similarity there. But then I have to like do my life now, so maybe I read some things that are contemporary, but also maybe I read a book that's like 100 years old. A book that's 100 years old is much more like a contemporary book than like a Greek myth. In some ways, like I don't know. It's like you don't hear the old book people talking much about like maybe in some things like Jane Austen and stuff like that or whatever of like those novels of that kind of era, but not like the theology of the 19th century or 18th century. And it's like, oh, well, everybody's kind of like following the same pattern, but somebody had to live at that time and they had to be a contemporary. And that was like somebody's whole life. And we sort of treat their whole life, if it's not in like maybe one of the particularly salient fields, as if it was just nothing. Um, and that's even to say, really, there is that level of complexity like anywhere, and probably there is wisdom to be reaped. I guess I guess you could say the same thing. Like I can compare Greek mythology and the stories, these mythological stories, to the storylines from professional wrestling, and there is a heck of a lot of similarity. And in some ways, it's almost like it's more alive because they know, like, when people stop watching, when people start to get bored, they realize we're not on the path anymore, and they have to like adjust really quick. And every time that it's working, they end up like fulfilling those kind of archetypal patterns of a story, which in my mind, that's like, well, that's like a greater proof that there's something to it than the fact that this book is really old.
Yeah, I think when you form an institution around ancient literature, you keep alive a certain amount of the context that allows you to sort of live in that space. So to the extent that you can sort of drag that over into your life as much as you can, it's like you're making a little garden for yourself where you understand how these people thought, you understand what culture was like, you surround yourself with older books. It's in a quiet space of a library or a study, and it's in a very controlled setting, so it is in a sense kind of a lab that you're operating out of. But in order to create, you have to take what you've discovered and distilled and found in the lab out into the real world and see what it can do. And so I think if I have like I said, feeling a bit on the fringe of TLC, it's like I'm more on the side of what we can do with it. And I've been interested to see, like, I've loved the conversations, if you've watched them with on Gray's channel with Jordan Hall and Annie. Always forget her last name. Crawford. And they're sort of moving in that direction of building something.
Yeah.
Figuring out what it is that they've loved about these older books, and then applying it to the modern context, and at the same time applying it in a way that will hopefully form the modern context. And I don't think they would argue this It's not like we're trying to rebuild what was, like make that again. It's like we're trying to capture what's true. Those same threads that you talked about that you see in modern literature and you see in old literature, and you can draw parallels. It's like, oh, well, this must be something that is more likely to be true because I can see that same pattern sort of growing up out of that. And all truth is God's truth, you know. And so you can look into anything and then find those threads and use, based on your limited resources, you can use the imperfect collection that you have to actually start to piece these things together. And I would agree generally that some of the older books, there are aspects of truth that are much more thoroughly thought through and interconnected, much more robust. I do like that word, and I say it a lot. Whereas more contemporary things might be a little more scattered. But what the contemporary kind of provides is sort of that broader, flexible architecture, whereas the older things are more constrained and confined, and then you use those together to kind of build out further, and that it's that same pattern again. And I appreciate that it seems slowly but surely that people are starting to move towards, it's like, how do we build these things in a modern context? How do we draw out the patterns that we love in the old things that we see truth in, and live them instead of just talking about them? And what does it mean? What does it mean to embody these things? Is, you know, just that's coming up constantly, is embodied. And yeah, I'm wandering.
Yeah.
Again.
Well, no, you know, so I mean, it's interesting. So I didn't finish the most recent talk they had, but then I was okay. So I was really happy about there's one, because I have this little bit of suspicion in my head. I was really happy that Annie brought it up or whatever, because it's like, oh, well, you know, she's talking about whatever, the gymnasium and like, I don't know, I guess the book part or the whatever, like the thinky talky stuff, and like then like using the body or whatever, but noticed that the Greeks did not have a proper appreciation for skill and craftsmanship in some sense, or they, you know, obviously they took advantage of it, but they saw it as this lesser thing. You know, they had like a class distinction. And so, like, well, that's you and me. That's how we would make a living. So we would be some kind of second-class citizens or whatever, having to listen to the philosophers tell us about why the thing won't work. And while we're just saying, well, let's just try it. Let's just try it. No, because first principles, etc. You know, so and I was glad that Annie like mentioned that. But then it's kind of like, well, then why are we starting with Plato's like formula for how to do education and all this stuff? Like, if he's got this major like flaw in his thing, why are I don't know. And this might, it's like, why don't we just start with the Bible then? We'll just start there. Like, there's some sort of a weird cred that you get from like those classical sources or whatever that I don't know. I wonder almost if it's just a thing of, because it takes like a lot of time and effort to learn it. It's like maybe it is like a gatekeeping thing in some sense. So it is like you have to become a philosopher to participate. And but I was here. I'm going to add this, share this. I'm sure, you know, but then it's like I see stuff like this. You know, this bacterial motor, and it's like we keep finding that, like, I don't know, this is just a weird thing, I think, because like we have this, or a lot of people tend to have this like revulsion towards like the mechanical, but then what we think of as like an organic thing at this super tiny level really starts looking mechanical, and in a lot of ways more efficient and like amazing mechanical. Like the problem with our concept of mechanical, it's all like, you know, steampunk or whatever. It looks all clunky, like steampunk Frankenstein. God's designs are way more elegant, but they are no less mechanical in some ways. Like, I mean, you know, they won't work without spirit. If there's no life in the cell, it won't work. But I don't know. It's just, I wonder if it's just like that is one of those things of like, because I feel like, because when you look at that, it's not like, because people would say the reduction argument, like Darwin said, the cell is just composed of undifferentiated protoplasm, and so you can say just if you think it's just goo. Oh, these things are just made of goo. But it's, you start looking again and it's not goo, and then it's like this, and you can say, yes, it's just like a mechanical arrangement of a bunch of little, whatever molecules and stuff, or proteins, but it's not just, because it's like you can't, maybe you can design it, but like nobody reading old books can design it. So
yeah, there's something about, and my intuition says we're on the edge of, and we have been in many ways, but we're on the edge of a uniquely golden age of engineering, because engineering to me is kind of the theology between science and philosophy. It's the connectedness between the continuous and the fixed. It's the order between kind of an outward continuous chaos and a fixed internal chaos. And I know that's probably not going to make sense to many people, but if you can maybe follow me along a little and see if we can get somewhere about this. It's that, yeah, I wrote that little, I don't know if I call it an essay, but that little paper about beautiful machines, and digging towards what it means to be mechanical in the first place. And people say, it's like the cathedral is a technology. It's that in between space that connects the vertical and the horizontal and things like that. And there is a sense that the mechanism sits at the center and is the shape that connection takes. Because all that a machine is really a pattern that moves. It's a pattern that's dynamic. That's all a machine is. So if you have a dynamic pattern at the center of these two, at the center between outside and inside, vertical and horizontal, philosophical and scientific, liberal and conservative, what you have at the center is a mechanism. It is a pattern that moves. It is a pattern that's dynamic. It is a pattern that points to the logos of creation. It is an interconnectedness of the shared mind and the shared reality. And all of the creativity, all of the choices made, all of the persons, all of the individuals, all of the variety exists at the center of that, in between those two states of extreme. Because you can take conservatism to a state of extreme, and it's not a positive thing. You can take liberalism to a state of extreme, and it's not a positive thing. But a functional nation lives in the beautiful machine at the center that connects both of them in a way that is meaningful. And I don't think there's any avoiding that ultimately. And people don't, I don't understand. And I think just being in it and having done, maybe I do understand to a degree, but it's not something that's sort of, I've been able to internalize deeply, is people's fear of mechanism. Because to me, what it takes to build a beautiful mechanism is overwhelming. All that goes into creating something that works well is a testament to the effort put in by the creator. And so in my mind, if God put a mechanism at the center of things that brings together opposites, that unites opposites in itself, it's going to be the most beautiful machine. It's going to be the most beautiful mechanism. It's not going to be cold because it's going to be alive because the spirit is in it. And so I don't find systems and mechanism frightening or cold. I think because and my friend Glenn, who I chat with on a regular basis, brought up the point. It's like when you have somebody who's worked with a tractor, a farmer who's had a piece of farming equipment that they've had for 60 years, and it's not a cold, dead thing to him. It's always singing, it's always talking, it's always moving in a certain way, it's jangling about, and it's interacting with its environment and with him in a way that he is familiar with, and he can hear the thing. It's like over the course of building a connection with this machine by exposure, you develop a conscience, in a sense, that allows you to know what's right and wrong about the thing. Is it working well? Is it in the state of balance? How well tuned is the carburetor or carburetors? Because they will give me a different song based on how well they're working. What is the state of the bearings in each of my wheels, or what is the state of the edge on the blades as they cut into the soil? It's going to sing a song to me, and my conscience is attuned to the most ideal form of that I can grasp, because it tells me when things are good, it tells me when things are bad, it tells me when I've hit a rock, it tells me when I need to change the oil, it tells me when bearings need to be reloaded or replaced, it tells me when I need to open up and adjust the carburetor and fiddle with the jets. And in the same way, why is it so bad if at the center of things, to which our conscience is constantly, Lord willing, trying to attune itself to, is a machine that sings a song to us that tells us whether things are good or bad, whether things are working well or they're not, whether or not we are making a good connection or we are not, whether this relationship is healthy, or in what ways in particular. It's like if the fuel mixture is too rich or too lean, I'm going to get a different song. It's not so much that I can do one thing to fix it. If it's too lean, I need to enrich it. If it's too rich, I need to lean it out. And it's all possible because there is mechanism that has properties that you can come into relationship with, that sing a song that is accessible to you. And so that's my
well, the music thing, that fits perfectly to what I was thinking about too, because of all the, I have to write things but when it is bothering me, regardless of if I ever share it. So there's a lot of stuff that I've never shared that I've still thought through in writing. And one of them that was trying to make sense of this thing in the Orthodox Church against musical instruments or whatever, or why they chant normally or instead of using instruments, but then sometimes special dispensation for bells are okay. And I'm trying to think through this, and I had already written something. This is interesting because it was Steven Pinker, not a theist, but wrote this thing, had this whole thing about speech and language and stuff. And I copied it in my book and put it in there. because he's saying like, okay, well, when you speak, it's like breath, and in biblical terms, that's spirit, but you fill your lungs with spirit. It moves over your larynx, which is like designed to buzz, basically. It vibrates under with that air pressure. And then the act of speech is that you are changing the shape of several chambers in your mouth and your throat and nose and etc. So it's like an architectural thing. But in some sense, it's like, well, okay, we have this idea of like ideals, and it's like, what's the ideal space of like a shape or whatever? And it's like any ideal shape is going to be static. It won't sing, really. It needs to be able to move to sing, if you want it to articulate. But so that was one aspect that I was thinking about. And then even going back to thinking on the other end, like how we hear. And if you look at what's in your ear, and you essentially have like a trumpet and a drum and something kind of like a string or a reed instruments, that things that vibrate at certain pitches. You have that membrane that transfers like kinetic energy into sound waves, and it's like there's like three musical instruments in your ear, and there's like three in your mouth, and like also all I can see is like, okay, well, this is a way that it gives a voice maybe to somebody who is like mute or deaf, or that's even like, think about like Beethoven, he couldn't hear, so he used to put his ear like on the piano and bang it super hard, and then he can feel it. And to me, the amazing thing was like, yeah, all of these mechanical things or these instrumental things, they're all aspects of translation. And that's one of the huge things I think that is especially core to like the Christian understanding of God's communication, is like that. Like God wants the meaning to come through. The meaning cannot be lost, like in translation. Like aspects or certain things can be lost in translation. So that's like, so then you maybe have like a cultural uncomfortability of like, oh, why is somebody using like an electric guitar in a worship service? That's bad. But it doesn't. And even you say like, oh, the signal may be distorted, but it doesn't warp the meaning that comes through. You can still identify the pitches, and in some ways, like that distortion, what it does is it highlights certain resonant, frequencies that are like naturally occurring. It actually amplifies one pattern that's like a pleasing and harmonious aspect, and suppresses other patterns of, it basically it increases the signal and decreases some aspects of the noise in some ways. So it's like, yeah, and so it's just like God's speaking in a billion different ways all around us, and when we get caught up in like the particulars of like this one's good and that one's bad, it's it's just an argument that doesn't really resonate with me, and I feel like it's sad because the other one is much more beautiful, like that. And even if it is people, like even if it's people trying to like subvert a message or twist it or distort it, I don't think they actually can. Not in an ultimate sense, the truth comes through, even through our purposeful manipulations.
Yeah. Well, yeah, going back to the first, and I think the issue of connection is a really important one. And going back to the first thing you were talking about, the voice box, it's like the voice box is the connection between the mind and expression, and the ear and everything that's going on in that canal is the connection between expression and the mind. And well, Luke said, what about the concern that mechanisms can be manipulated? I think, consider that there is an ideal around which we can.
So, I mean, yeah, well, the point I'll get things with this is like, obviously, like there are ideals in some sense, but those ideals, like whatever the worst possible thing that you can imagine is, believe it or not, God can probably imagine a worse thing. And part of, like, I feel like the outplaying of creation is God showing us that those things can be overcome in some ways. I mean, like, there's a lot of tragic consequences that come through, yeah, like the manipulation and the mechanization of sex. But then there's also like human beings that are of inestimable value that are the product of those very wrong things. So,
Well, I think the manipulation comes in the bringing together of opposites. If like Luke says, held relations. Well, held relations is a dynamic pattern that brings together, husband and wife. And where the manipulation comes in is the imbalance between husband and wife. And that imbalance is expressed as a specific operation in the held relation dynamic pattern, in the mechanism between them that connects them. And if you're well-tuned to the Logos, if your relationship is built around Christ, then what is between you will balance in a way that is ideal. It will convict you in a way that is sensible and understandable. And it will allow you to correct in the best way possible if you're willing to be obedient to the truth that comes from that, the outcome of that, and the indicators of that interaction. And so I think a held relation is a dynamic pattern, which is a machine in the beautiful sense.
the other thing that comes to mind is that all the manipulations, it's always people are trying to manipulate some part of it, but not all of it, because your sex organs are still trying to be fruitful and multiply, even if you as a person are not, like when you're trying to misuse them. Yeah. Like unless good. If they lose their telos, then you're not going to have fun at all. Nothing's happening, and even that's to say, let's see, this thing still works even when our sinful nature doesn't want to go along with God's plan,
Top Cock says, so the way you relate is the important thing, not the non-machine split. I think the way you relate to things is, in some sense, a product of the machine aspect. It's like that's the pattern that you push against, that shows you, like in the same way that you talk, certain things work. It's like you're going to have to stretch and manipulate how things are supposed to work in order to get the outcomes that you want. If you're out of balance, if I want to dominate my marriage, I have to push and stretch and manipulate the well-ordered system that I exist within in order to get the outcome that I want. And that's ultimately going to be destructive, because the thing will correct because it underlies everything that is. And it will order everything in that way ultimately. And to the extent that I have the resources to maintain this tension that allows me to dominate my marriage and gives me the control that I think I want, to the extent that I have the energy and resources to put into that, I can maintain that for a time. But as soon as the money runs out, as soon as my health deteriorates, it's like things that I've held in place are going to naturally fall apart and returned back towards the direction that they should be in. You don't always survive that process, but I think it's not so much, getting back to what he said, it's not machine, non-machine. It's the connection that is made and what the mechanism tells you about how things are supposed to work. And it's not It's not that the mechanism is some dead thing. If you think something that is the way it is cold and dead, well, I mean, God says, I am that I am. It's like, I don't change. So it's like, what does not to say God's a machine, but there's an aspect of connectedness that is drawn up from his character to the extent that we are image bearers. And we can trust that if we choose humility, if we choose alignment with that greater thing, instead of self-referential reinforcement, we're going to move towards the direction to where we can be more sensitive to the operations of things in a way that allows us to correct what goes wrong in the most efficient manner. And all of this language is very off-putting to people, more on the woo scale. But for me, it is kind of there's something ultimately woo about it. Because what we make are just the machines that the archetypes that we build in our mind of what machines are just caricatures of something greater, as far as I'm concerned. They're pointing towards something ideal and divine and fixed in a way that is perfect and eternal, and is also relational in the sense that it shows us how to align with it so that we can be in proper relationship with it, and so that we can grow and explore and discover the endless possibility of what it means to be in relationship with God. So God's not a machine. I want to just say that outright.
Yeah. I put the thing in, so if anybody wants to come, instead of just arguing with the comments, just come and argue in person. We're not really have an argument. Oh, I think it's one of these things. So it's like my beef with like the King's North way of thinking, and I feel like it is like this. It's almost like this vibe or whatever. It really comes down to like not God being a machine, but like questions about like what kind of world he created. And because it's more or less like, did he create the world where, is there some other ideal world where Adam and Eve don't eat the tree? And do you believe that that's the world that we should have been living in? I think God was fully capable of imagining that world. I don't think that's the world he created. I think he didn't create that world specifically. But, if you have that mode of thinking, you're almost always like creating these imaginary worlds. Every time something goes wrong, you're creating an imaginary world where it didn't go wrong. But none of those are the worlds that God created. They're not the ones that we live in. So it's not, and it's even to say, Paul says, should we sin so grace may abound? Absolutely not. That's not the point. But we can, be realistic about it, and we don't have to. And I think that's the thing. It's the fear, because the fear of like making that critical mistake keeps us from doing so much. That, and I think that's the devil's game. That's not God's game. That's the devil's game. The devil just tries to get us on the sidelines. If he can't, ruin your life, that's where he wants you. He wants you inactive, not doing something. And whatever you do it as unto the Lord. And he can do something good with it. But that's the thing. It's us giving our abilities and our choices to him, not waiting always for him to tell us exactly everything to do. Like that's almost like us wanting to be robots, that we want like such specific direction about every like choice in our life. Like, God's given us freedom. I think, the Christian is the one who has real freedom, because we're not bound in addictions or whatever, like by the flesh. So use your freedom to do something good, and you'll do it. Yeah, you will always do it in an imperfect way. But then that's just the thing that gives God the glory, because the imperfections are yours. The result is his.
Yeah. I was looking at the comments. Luke says he can't come online, but he did say God is not a machine. Agreed. Neither are we. I don't know about eternal structures. I agree. We're not machines, but we are also mechanical. Like, there's no way around that. I know that's a simplification of what you're aiming at, but like, it's just, I want the conversation to continue about the connectedness and the structure of connectedness. It's like you have to share something that is consistent over time so that you can have a relationship in the first place and continue to have a relationship over time. It's like, and you could go so far as to say, oh, well, that doesn't take any particular shape. It's like, well, I mean, there are things. Yeah, that was a good one too. Why aren't there things that do not change? And it's not that it's going back to that idea that creativity flourishes within boundaries. So what's the ideal set of boundaries? It's like, well, maybe, that's put in place. What we're looking at is the ideal set of boundaries. And the confusion we have about why it's not working well is our disconnect from that ideal set of boundaries, our misunderstanding of how that ideal set of boundaries is laid out. And the beautiful thing about the ideal is it belongs to God. It is, in a sense, divine, and it is, in a sense, untouchable, but it's not that it's unexplorable. I think there's a conversation I haven't finished with on climbing Mount Sophia that just popped up recently that I recommend everybody go watch. And I think Matthew and Daniel are on there with him having a conversation. But it's not that one of them said something along the way that it's like it's an invitation into the endless wonder that can be explored eternally. And as soon as you can step out of the stereotype of machine you have in your mind and think of, like, do the little thought experiment of what would the eternal structure be? And it is relational. That structure is relational. Everything is, I think you're pointing at something important. Just being no.
Yeah.
None of it is taken personally, and I always enjoy talking with you, Luke. You and I are very similar in a lot of ways. But yeah, sorry, you can go ahead. I was winding it up.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, this whole thing of, like, I don't know, some of it's like that tension, the already and the not yet. But I feel like, okay, progress is like a dirty word, mostly because it's been pointed at really stupid stuff. But like, okay, so take like a boogeyman, like, the transhumanist thing, and be like, oh, the transhumanists, they want to do this horrible thing. And so it's like, okay, first of all, do you actually think they're going to be able to succeed in what they're doing? I don't. If it means like this Tower of Babel thing, creating a world without God, where they're, I don't think they're going to succeed in that.
But what's judging that imperfect structure? Like, what is the judge of that thing?
Yeah, the reality, that the constraints of the reality that God actually did create. But the thing is that, like, what they're failed. So I mean, maybe that's even a thing. They're, bold enough to just come out there and say their ultimate belief or whatever, like, maybe humans should cease to exist as they are, and some new thing should replace us, or whatever, whatever the thing is. Like, they say their crazy thing, and we react against that because that doesn't line up with the telos of creation and God's plan. But what are they trying to do to get there? They're monkeying around with a bunch of mechanical things and electrical things like that. And because they've connected it to like a bad telos, I would say, we are really suspicious of it, and we want to oppose it. But if you look at, like, okay, I didn't see the whole season, but I saw a couple episodes of like one of the more recent seasons of This Old House, and they were rehabbing this house for a family where the kid, he was like 10 years old or whatever, and he's got this degenerative disease. And so it's like he's can kind of get around now, but they know within the next 10 years he's going to be like basically paralyzed. And then all of the technological stuff that's within that domain of like health services and things that like the quality of life that that kid will get to have, part of it due to the fact that like his parents are wealthy enough to afford it, but it's like it's amazing. And it's like if you think about like whatever, just go to any slum around the world where you will find like kids with uh deformities and missing limbs or any of these things, and to realize like, oh, there are things that we can do to give that person to restore some of like what the fallen nature of the world has taken away from them, and even like the Neuralink thing, like the people that have used it so far, it's like allowing paralyzed people to communicate. Like that's a good thing, not a bad thing. And people are like, oh, they're just doing it with their mind. And then it's like, realize, when you move that mouse around, you're not thinking about it. You don't know how that actually works. You don't have to consciously like tell the muscles in your hand to move. We do that like with tools or whatever. Like we just control them with our mind, and we don't know how we're doing it. But there's something about that, like that next step that freaks us out.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I just think like, I'm more of the more convinced that there is something in this real world that's supposed to reflect the ultimate, that and it is in the like reparation of those things, like, because if we say like, oh, your all of your illness and your disability, it's all going to be healed in heaven, or in the life to come or whatever, and we'll just like say that in faith, and it's like we want people to believe in this God that we serve. Like, well, maybe we can show, maybe there's some way that we can actually give a little bit of evidence that like that we're not already, like, that this isn't the ideal or whatever, like, so I mean, like, and it does have, I think it does have to happen in some sense in these material things, and it comes through things like mechanical means or whatever. Like, yeah, like I think I almost feel like it's just maybe the whole issue of like technology or progress. It's one that Christianity is just the reason why we associate these things with all these villains is because we refuse to do anything with it. So we just give it up to them. We just let them be in charge. Like, it's and I have no worries that eventually, like, once the stuff is not a scary boogeyman anymore, it just is going to get integrated into the way we use it. But like, maybe no, it's the opposite of this, Luke. The thing is that we're letting sin abound because we're not guiding the ship. So like, I mean, I think like with reproductive stuff, like I think that's a big category. Like there's a lot of people that want to do like really freaky stuff with that. Like maybe if we had a voice in that conversation, and just instead of just like saying shut the whole thing down, we could steer people towards some more ethical choice. So yeah.
Before it disappears, I really appreciate Topcock's comment about. Yeah, that was a good one. Thanks. That makes me feel good.
Yeah.
And then I was kind of following. I don't really know what Neil's getting at, but I trust the guy generally, so I know he's getting at something. Let's see, most chooses. Yeah, I really liked your point about kind of what came to mind, because for a long time I was, designing mechanical things. I don't know if I have any close by. I have a really old one. Oh yeah. I was just always sort of obsessed and thinking about like how mechanical things work. And like in this case, this is like a really old, years ago, it's all rusty, you can see, just kind of working out how to design the knuckles for a mechanical hand. And so stuff like that was just always fascinating to me. But that idea of, and if you read my kid's book, like you're really hitting on the theme of that book, which I think has been kind of hard for some people to hit on. It's like if we want to give, if our child is born without the ability to grasp, we want to give our child the ability to grasp. Yeah, okay, I see what you're... if you want to give your child the ability to grasp, what are you going to do? Are you going to just out of whole cloth just think about, okay, grasping, we'll give him some sort of grasping mechanism? Or are you going to look at the ideal that's sitting there in front of you, and are you going to mimic that as best you can? And in the long run, your child will benefit from your ability to observe and understand and mimic the ideal as closely as you can with the technologies and resources that you have available to you. So the question that I have, and that I think is important for Christians to have input on, is like, okay, if we think of this mechanical arm and we think of this LLM, it's like, if God is good and the timing is his, and these tools become available in the order that they do, is there something redeemable about this thing? And what is it in the same armness sense of this mechanism that we've created for our disabled child? How are we broken in a way that we can build something that supplements us in a way that allows us to do something that we can't right now? And long term, we won't want to need it forever. Like, Lord willing, Michael 11 figures it out and my kid can grow another arm at some point. Like that is what I would want. But it's moving us back towards restoring. It's like take dominion. It's like dominion over things in the biblical sense. It's like, what is it? How can we use what's coming in a Christian way to restore things as they were meant to be, to the extent that we can understand that, while being sensitive to being obedient to God's purposes in the world? So it's just it's a hard question. In as much as that mechanical arm is meant to help your child, what is this LLM and its mechanical armness? What is it meant for, and how can we make the most of it? And what is the Christian answer to the the Frankensteins that are being created? Yes, and okay, Icarus, I totally, unless are you talking to me? If you are talking to me,
I'm saying, he's, Lord willing, Mike 11 will figure it out and grow me some wings.
Oh, okay, good.
You.
But I do recognize the starry-eyed, childlike naivety that I tend to walk into these things. But I like to balance that against the call of us Christians to be like children in order to enter into the kingdom of God. So it's like, okay, yeah, Icarus is too far, but the grounded ambition, I don't think was, I'm wandering at this point, but yes.
Yeah, well, I feel like one of the things with this is there is a really big problem with this thing of, it's just really hard for people to not like sacrifice ideals or whatever. So it's like, thinking about, the school system that Jordan and Annie are saying, like, this is the ideal. And it's like, yeah, great. Like, I can't afford that, or whatever, right? It's not going to happen right now. Is there something in this, through LLMs or through whatever, that I could use that will make the terrible public school that's in my neighborhood a little bit better. Like, you know, and honestly, it's like I can definitely see how putting if you know, it's not like the screen necessarily itself. It's the fact that we've only made things that are extractive and addictive to put on these screens, like um you know, it's like when I was a kid, there was a guy, you know, when like email was new, there was a guy in my church who would email me like Bible questions, like as like for me to study, and it was like I learned a lot through that. Like you could just do that with an LLM can easily do that, you know, tell the chat thing, ask my kid to find the answers to these 5 questions in the Bible and write back and judge how well he answers, you know, like that's like why aren't we doing that for, like, you know what I mean? It's like because it's not the ideal of having face to face, you know, with the person. Well, those people are, there's not enough of those people, but we can have a lot of robots that are better than nothing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, that I think this is a big part of why I vibe with Grimm's project to the extent that I understand it, is there's a profound brokenness right now. So thinking of my child born without an arm, well, there's a lot of children born without parents. Like, like they're raised by screens, raised by machines. They're broken in a way that is unique to the age, in its specifics, at least. And suddenly, so we have a profound brokenness and a profound tool. And so, what is the crossover there? Like in the same sense that, you know, servos and microcontrollers are a profound tool that allow me to give grasping back to my child. Is there a way, and it's not obvious to me just yet, but is there a way to use this profound tool that we have to give our children back, not parents, but the thing that is broken because of the circumstances that they've been raised in? And that is an important question to me, because the neighborhood I live in, we've been in some very challenging times in our life, and we're relatively low income, though we're doing a lot better than most. But the neighborhood we're in is full of single mother families and children whose just dads aren't around, people who are struggling, people who've recovered from addiction, people who are still struggling with addiction. And it's very close to home seeing, like, I'm grateful and I pray that we be a light in this neighborhood, because our kids aren't allowed screens generally. Like, they can watch movies and we have laptops and tablets that they use for educational purposes. But when they go out, like, it's been really nice because our kids love to play and they love to be creative. And all the kids kind of around just sort of congregate around our house because our kids are out there and they're doing things. But I see, like, the ones that sort of trail off are the ones that don't come in so much. It's like they're the ones with their phones, and it'll be, you know, little 4 and 5-year-olds sitting there. Like, they'll come over and they'll hang out near us, but then they'll plop down on the porch and just like stare at their phone. And it's like, if I think too hard about it, I'm overwhelmed and exhausted by grief. But if I focus on the fact that by providence, as far as I'm concerned, we have a powerful tool that may provide a means for us, if we are wise in how we think about it and apply it, to rescue our children from their one-armedness, whatever that is nowadays. And it's a hard problem that I have not fully been able to form in my mind, but I hope that's something that will continue to form in the conversations that are kind of going around TLC, and with Grimm's project in particular, because I know he's passionate about that. But I think it's a useful question to ask. It's like powerful, incredible, profound brokenness incredibly powerful tool, and they're both showing up at the same time. So maybe.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, I think there's, I would say anybody that's really paying attention, you look at like this all this like birth rate crisis stuff, and like, okay, we probably should put as many of our eggs into like the robots basket as we can, because if the lack of work and stuff, if it leads to the places it typically does, which is like war and famine, that's really bad. But that could actually be something that uh, keeps some of that from happening in some ways, something like that. Like otherwise, because we're not gonna. I mean, and that's even the thing. It's like none of the boomers are gonna have to deal with it. We might be old. It's really gonna affect our kids and grandkids, and and to not like think about it in that way seems like really irresponsible. And so I mean, it just to think of like, so much time gets spent just arguing about stuff like that we can't even really control. But and all that does really is just cause us to be more suspicious of the people that think differently than we do. So maybe in that sense, it's even just like, I mean, because that's the thing. All these things, I can put myself in all their shoes, and it's almost like, yeah, I don't want to like raise my hand and come out and say it, but it's like I can see a lot of circumstances where I'm more like the Peter Thiel or the Elon Musk, and then to have the people that I'm currently friends with, like, well, they would, if I had made different choices and I had ended up in that world, what would they think of me? Like that's not a great, it's not a great feeling to have, so, but all I can really do with that is then to be like, well, I don't want to do that to somebody else then. So I'm going to take control of how I treat others and try to listen more than I'm speaking, especially because that's the thing, I think people don't realize, like, a lot of times we just say these things like this. There's a whole lot of stuff that I just, and you probably saying, same thing, feeling on the fringe sometimes of the TLC. Like, I'm just not going to respond. I'd rather not get into an argument with people that I do more or less consider friends. Like, I don't want to, I don't want to have this space turn into like some, just a debate sphere or anything like that. And so it's like, well, that's a trade-off, where you have to choose to make. It's not, that's not an ideal, but yeah.
No, I feel that for sure. My default is to assume that I've worn out my welcome with people. Like, that's just my default. Because I tend, when I really get going, I can be pretty overwhelming because I'm exploratory and optimistic and hopeful, and because of what I went through when I was younger, all of that is tied up with a very dark sense of humor that can be rather dry. And so I just generally assume that if someone quits talking to me, it's like, oh, okay, and to move on, because it's and two, if you're trying to do something different and you're trying to build something that hasn't been built, and you're trying to answer a question that nobody else wants, or not nobody else, but a lot of people don't want to think about, because it's going to require sacrifice and change. And it's going to require this simple model I have of the world to break a little, to let the light in and initiate some new growth. And I know I'm not the alone in TLC feeling that way, but Yeah, I feel you on that for sure.
Yeah, well, and I mean, I think there is something of like, maybe it's a weird you and I or whatever, especially because it's like a way station for a lot of people. There's a lot of people that come in and they come out. I think maybe in some sense, like you and I, there's not, people find a place and it's like, I've explored most of the places. The place that I'm looking for doesn't really exist. So that means you got to build it, like that's okay. It's okay. It's just, that's a bigger challenge in some ways,
Yeah.
especially because, yeah.
And I'm leaning into that more because I've sort of hesitated to associate myself directly with the project of alignment when it comes to AI, because it tends to degenerate into platitudes about ethics, or kind of it's a problem that can become overwhelming pretty quickly. But at the same time, it's like I'm fascinated by the problem because, in part, it requires that I get to know myself better, in the sense that it's going to expose things about me that I might not want exposed, because it's a matter of deep function. And the more I dig into deep function, the more I'm going to run into dysfunction. And that's going to be uncomfortable and painful in a lot of instances. But more and more, I feel like the project is important, and whatever the outcome, I'm hoping to kind of start to invite conversations around. Maybe I can do that now. Just invite a conversation around what alignment is, like how we should define it in the first place, and where to begin in order to solve the issue, in hopes that maybe there's a way to help the profound brokenness that we see around us with the tool that has presented itself. And again, not saying it's a good thing or it's ideal or it's going to work out or this is even a smart thing to do, but where I stand now, it does make sense. And I feel a significant amount of joy as I explore it, and peace, at least in the moment, for where I am thinking about it. So, so if anybody wants to chat about that sort of thing, hit me up sometime.
Yeah. Did you see my solution to making the AI videos more personable or whatever?
Was that your robot presenter?
Yeah, the robot hosts.
So what if I told you that the invisible forces shaping what you want, who you admire, and even how you think are all part of an ancient religious system that's just hiding in plain sight? In this explainer, we're diving into a section from Michael Sartori's Tenets Before Temples, a book that honestly decodes the hidden economics of our modern culture. And it
So, I mean, obviously, I have to get the speech to line up a little better, but that was just, I just made the picture and then I put it into Grok Imagine and had it animate it into so I just made the picture of robots in a studio, and then it just gave me little things where I could have their mouth move, but
yeah,
it was very, very hastily done. But
I part of what makes me laugh about that is I think in an effort to solve a problem, you often solve it badly first. And if you can't laugh at the initial attempts, and if you can't just laugh at yourself and lean into the humor of your first attempts at trying to solve a problem, then you're not going to get anywhere.
Well, maybe the thing is because this is the weird thing, because it's I realized okay, because it gives you the video with the pictures and it has the voice and it sounds very real, and it would have been easier maybe in some ways. I could have just had fake real people that look real. You could just have real people that are fake, or fake versions of real people, whatever, however you want to say it. I could make it look fully like a real video of real people talking.
Yeah.
But I don't want I don't want to deceive people. I want them to know this is an AI generated thing. It is useful to me. Like, hey, this made a 7-minute video that is like, I mean, I can't do anything in 7 minutes. So that's great. So maybe the thing is like, we just need to give them like, maybe not those ones, but like cute, like lovable 1950s robot bodies, so that we don't feel afraid of them or whatever. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure somebody will make a horror movie about that too. But like, I don't know. There's I think it is a lot just of like the unknownness of it, and it does seem a lot like magic in a lot of ways. So, yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I posted recently was innovation is always offensive because innovators play with the things that other people take very seriously, and really it's you're playing with this, and I appreciate that.
Aaron, can you put your camera on for a second?
Oh, did Aaron make it?
Oh, is it someone you have invited? Or
yeah,
he's in the house?
Aaron Lowry. You might have run into him a couple times. If it is him.
Let's see.
Spelled the same.
Hello. Well, just so long as wieners don't pop up. I haven't had one of those in a while, so that's we've been fortunate.
I'm sorry that you've had any of them. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, it was like back in the day, it seemed like it happened more frequently. Some people even would like put like a little video clip of like a face, so it looks like, oh, this is a real person, and then they would put that. So I'm gonna need you to put a newspaper with today's date up on the screen.
No, we'll see if he makes it in. I gotta go help with kids and baby soon anyway.
My kid. Oh. Hello.
There he is.
Howdy. Good afternoon. Gabriel, good to talk again. Michael, it's a pleasure. I don't know that we've ever really had any interactions, but I've encountered your streams. Obviously, I'm not that public, but it's a pleasure to talk with you guys. Gabriel invited me this afternoon.
Cool.
Told him to stop by. You know Ken Lowry, right, Michael? Have you interacted with Ken?
I don't think I've really interacted with him, but
They're brothers.
Yeah, that makes sense.
He's a fellow dirty fingernailed blue collar guy like us. So
nice.
Very much so. Uncredentialed. Just try to get by on my own merits most of the time. Almost forced to.
So have you been listening to what we've been talking about? Any comments, conversation before we?
I've only caught probably the last half hour. I was engaged in a skid steer repair project, so hydraulics and whatnot. But it's better now. So
this is the topic.
Oh yeah.
Old books, are they overrated?
Feel free to share your thoughts.
Why don't you guys just kind of continue the way you're going, and I'll find a natural place to jump in, because I was getting some glitchy streaming for about 2 minutes before I finally joined. So.
Well, I think my kids just got home and Gabriel said he was going to hop off. So I think we were coming to the end as it was anyway. But
you caught us right at the end, and we were hoping you'd come in and sum it all up for us.
Well, not having engaged with all of the content, I'm not sure if I can sum it up. I have a lot of thoughts about these things, but I don't want to kind of just branch off and extend the thing in a monologue. The relational aspect that you've been highlighting is key and fundamental, in the way that the way that we relate to information, the way we relate to, and extended all the way into our functional ontology, I think. I don't know, like I don't want to go too much into that, I don't think. I think what I would like to touch on maybe a little bit more is the idea of how we integrate technology practically.
Yeah,
I think that in a lot of ways, that's a good lens to view the human project through, is the integration of technology from language all the way up the stack. We are persistently faced with the challenge of maybe having more power than we know what to do with. And generally speaking, I think the pointy tip of the spear in any given exploratory kind of venture is going to be a little bit in an unknown orientation. You pursue the thing because it keeps giving you feedback, that keeps providing you with some information, and it keeps building or adding on to your model, or giving you a a more functional grasp. But it's not clear that let's say it extends your capability either to use a new tool or to use other tools in new or expanded ways. And it's not clear until you start doing that for a while how closely oriented that directionality is of that given exploratory technology with that of something like a holistically emerging core that's oriented towards human flourishing over a long term, like very low time preference. And that's kind of a way that I think about it, that makes it sort of organic, because I don't think that there's a way that you ever really, it's not the right way to approach it, just like go prune off all of the new things that are outside of the core of identified, like techne, in a sense, the things that have been pretty well integrated. There's a lot of things that we've integrated so thoroughly that we don't even think about them as technologies, I think. So just using that lens to like look all the way down the stack at, like, from a language to fire to all kinds of things, right? Like the wheel, like all gears, all kinds of the mechanisms like you talked about earlier, and then you can layer on hydraulic systems and electrical systems, and like all these kinds of things that often are in some sort of a hierarchy of complexity and some sort of interdependence. So we're leveraging a lot of these things all the times in different ways. And a lot of the times the new things that are emerging are like, it's not clear how they can be integrated in a sense. And maybe a good example of this, I think, that I try to imagine, or it seems like a good example to me, is the project of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is essentially the recombination of a bunch of pre-existing technologies. None of the things that went into the origin of Bitcoin were novel. They're actually just recombinations in the right balance and with the right kind of complementary dependencies, so that they create a remarkable organism, right? Like, it is distributed and decentralized, and it's been running for, gosh, what, 15, 20 years almost now, right? 2009, 16 years. So yeah, and you can look at that and you can see how it functions, the mechanics of it on a digital infrastructure. And then you have to also look at, like, what are the social vectors that are involved with it, because those aren't actually completely abstracted. At the end of the day, consensus fundamentally still resolves on a social level. And this is represented during forking events and things like this. So blockchains offer some interesting ways to view these things too, I think. But yeah, I think a lot of the time, the thing that we maybe, like, there's so many of these things there's so much potential that's been afforded by a lot of these very novel technologies. And the things that we tend to build initially are the things that are the low-hanging fruit, incentivized by our usually monetary system policies and regulatory environments and things like that. So, the internet version 1.0 and what it was 2.0 are not the same things. Like, it goes from a fairly decentralized infrastructure to a fairly centralized cloud hosting dependent kind of infrastructure or network topography. And as soon as that happened, like, the incentives changed, and you see that reflected in the way Google operated and the way Facebook operated and the way YouTube operated, and like everybody changed the way that, like, the thing that they fundamentally oriented towards and the way that the means that they use to achieve, say, profitability are actually an emergent property sort of like what the system incentivizes for. And we don't find out until 15 years later that, like, the thing we've been incentivizing for has been, like, massively corrosive to our entire society in ways that we weren't able to, like, you can never really capture the multi-order effects of these things in deployment. Like, there are too many variables. And we discover that usually by trial and error. So in a lot of ways, I think that's the project that, and the way to focus on the project in a sense is like, be recognizing the things that are emerging that have potential and like are useful tools, but maybe aren't even being applied in ways that are capturing and expressing that utility, at least not in a way that is oriented towards like a techne integration where it's oriented towards long-term human flourishing or something. I think if we are wise, we are sensitive to that, and we try to discover that rapidly. There's not a lot of wisdom in our environment currently, and the incentives don't align with long-term thinking in general. So, those are kind of different subjects that open different rabbit holes, kind of. But in summary, I guess those are some of my thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent teaser for potentially some future conversations. And I like your point about Bitcoin, that we may have everything we need to build something already. So.
And I'll use this opportunity to plug the fact that I have now recorded all the chapters of my book, and the last chapters are being released. They'll all be released by the end of the month, but one of them is there on cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. So spend a lot of time thinking about all those implications of the economic systems and stuff that we live in. And I think that there is that it is a lot. I mean, there's definitely something in the fact that, like, the people who have in some ways like the most important truths of, salvation and the kingdom of God have not been engaging. We've been leaving a lot of these discussions up to people who have a inferior aim, and it's not even for their fault. A lot of times they're trying to be altruistic and all that, but they just don't know the truth well enough to really formulate. They're formulating an idea of the future in reaction to a lot of bad things that are bad about the status quo or the past, but that's not a sufficient. That's still a reaction, and it's not a sufficient image. You need that vision of the New Jerusalem, and the thing is that, I guess this is what I say, in every age, it should be, and I think it probably was in some sense, that there's people who are living according to the pattern of the telos of creation, the way that God has really ordered the world. And when you look at the way they live in contrast to the way that the other people live, it's pointing at that ultimate, that final age, the age to come or whatever. And so as we go, as things change and that those current models, will get corrupted and all that stuff. Well, we need to create a new one. But we need to be doing something, and what we do should reflect that, because people need to be able to see that there is a difference. That there's something different about living in accordance with the way that God has created reality and how it's supposed to be. You know, it should be actually, I think, an appealing vision, and especially probably to the people who are getting beat up by the world as it is. You know, maybe not the bureaucrats on top. They'll be opposed to it, but you know, it's always bringing liberation and for the people that most need it, really. So, yep.
I think that's a good way to sum it up. I do have to go
Yeah,
help
and
with it. I'm glad you were able to
Yeah.
squeak in at the end there, Aaron. And
Yeah, sorry I couldn't make it sooner, but it was a pleasure to meet you, Michael, and to speak again, Gabriel, and look forward to doing it maybe again soon.
Yep, absolutely. I planned on having more live streams in the next few weeks as I'm hopefully home a little bit more. So, cool.
Very good.
All right. Have a
Great.
good evening.
Take care, you guys.
Bye.